Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. And I am extremely excited about this one. This guy has more books than me out there. Okay. That's rare when I get to meet people who have written more books than us. And he is all over the map when it comes to patriot everything. And I just love that. So, the book that we are talking about today is all about one of my favorite subjects, the American entrepreneur. Fascinating stories of the people who defined business in the United States. So Larry Schweikert, PhD. Larry Schweikert, thank you so much for being here, man.
Thanks. A little background on the book. I was hired by the University of Dayton sometime around 1985 and became a full professor. And to fulfill all the junk you have to do to be a professor, I was writing academic books and articles, which are very well cited, but nobody reads. I wanted to write for people, for a general public, to have an influence on people. So sometime around 98, 99, I wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial Adventure, which was supposed to be a history of business in the United States for a general audience. Unfortunately, there wasn't a good communication between me and my agent and the publisher, and we ended up with Harlan Davidson, which is a textbook publisher. And so it came out in 2000, and it did well. It sold out of its first printing, but it was all to universities and people teaching business history. So I didn't reach my goal of getting it on bookshelves. So when I got the rights back to that, and Professor Lynn Doty of Chapman University, who specializes in California banking, we decided to update the book, add more stuff to it, make it more focused on entrepreneurs and business people, not quite as much on economic theory. And that book came out sometime, I don't know, 2009, 10, something like that.
Gotcha. What I love about the entrepreneurial journey is that it is a very spiritual journey. And I think you talk about that early on in this book, where I mean, you can go back to the days of the Bible, but if you want to live a good life, help other people live a good life. And that's what entrepreneurship is in a nutshell. And I think you start off by talking about Adam Smith wrote a book, and I think it's called Wealth of Nations or something like that, back in 1776, somewhere in there, right?
Yeah.
And there was the idea that capitalism was all about selfishness, when it in actuality it's self-interest, right? And your
Right.
self-interest does not automatically lead to selfishness. Self-interest is, okay, how can I provide for my family? Well, in order for me to do that, I need to be of value to the marketplace. And the more I serve the many, service to the many leads to greatness, the Jim Rohn approach, if you will. So
Right.
that's what I love about the American entrepreneur. What do you love about it?
Well, let's go back to Smith for a minute. Smith was not an economist. He was a professor of moral philosophy at University of Glasgow in Scotland. And the book he wrote in 1754 was called A Theory of Moral Sentiments. So his emphasis, his concern was on morality, on goodness. What makes for goodness? And that's where he came up with this concept of self-interest, which is much different than selfishness. Self-interest really is, as the great economist Walter Williams used to explain, is all about uh, the probabilities and the numbers. It's all about what do I know about myself? What do you know about yourself that no one else can possibly know, certainly that no government bureau or agency can know? For example, this sounds really weird, but back in the early 90s, my wife was an aerobics instructor, and I got into teaching high-low impact, like Jamie Lee Curtis in the movie Perfect. Well, we were operating a lot on carpeted floors, and I found that the big basketball shoes didn't work for me. They got stuck in the carpet and I'd hurt myself. So I ended up using women's Reebok shoes because they work better on that carpet. Well, there's no agency in the world that would come up with the fact that you need women's Reebok shoes on a guy for this particular thing, right? So it's information about you. You like raspberries, but hate strawberries. You like really hot sauce, but really don't like fish sauce or whatever. All these little things are information about you that you transmit to the market and that others transmit to you by what they buy and what they sell. But no government agency can possibly have all this information with all the computers in the world.
Exactly right. Right. Self-awareness is crucial, but what you know about yourself, once again, it's very tailored to you. You're going to go out there and seek those solutions, which that is what that's what the capitalism's all about. Find somebody who has the solution to your problem. And anytime you incentivize against that, that's whenever you lead to a lot of trouble, right? That's when you lead
Right.
to control and lack of freedom. And capitalism's completely based off of what you offer the world and the solutions that you're able to provide for others, not just yourself.
Well, the great Thomas Sowell used to say that capitalism is all about um, what can you do for your fellow man? That the question Adam Smith asked really in his book, his second book, which was The Wealth of Nations, we'll talk about that again in a second, is have you served your fellow man today? And so people will say, oh, yeah, I serve my fellow man. Well, there's a follow-up question, and that is prove it. So you better be able to pull some green out of your wallet to prove that you've served your fellow man. And I used to tell my students who were very big on service, by the way, folks, if you're required to do a service either at your university or at your school, it's not service. Anytime you do service that is required, it's a requirement, it's not service. But anyway, I used to tell my students, and because they do all these service projects, I say, well, how do you know you're serving your fellow man? And they'd say, well, they tell me. I say, so you go and read to old people maybe once a week and you're serving them. Oh, yeah. How do you know? Well, they tell me. I said, do you hear what they say when you leave?
Because that's what
I'm
really
so
matters.
glad that girl left. I need to go to the bathroom, or I thought she's never going to shut up. If you have to pay for something, that's different because we'll go into this little side thing about money. What is money? Money is a physical manifestation of time, talent, and energy. I'll repeat that. Money is a physical manifestation of time, talent, and energy. So you know for a fact when someone gives you some of their time and their talent and their energy for something you do, say this book that I wrote, it's valuable to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't give up their time, which is very finite, talent, and energy, which is also finite. So this is how you know that you have a product that serves other people. Yes, service might help other people, but you can never quantify how much. But with the market, you can quantify how much you're helping other people by how much they're willing to pay you for what you do. So with my students, we would always get into things like, Bill Gates, and he makes an obscene amount of money. I'm no fan of Bill Gates, but think of it this way. I'd ask my students, how many times a day do you turn on your computer, your laptop, your phone, or whatnot? Oh, 15, 20 times a day, right? So what if each time you turned it on, let's say it's a Bill Gates product, you got charged a penny? How many people around the globe do that every single day? Billions and billions. Billions and billions of pennies times days, right? And pretty soon, guess what? You're a billionaire, right? Why? Because you've served those people in a way they hardly even notice it, because stuff on our phones these days is free,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Bill Gates either, but he has, through Microsoft, created a product, created a software that has actually made my life better. And
Right.
therefore, I do not say you don't deserve my money. I'm willing to pay to make my life better. Now, I wish he had better intentions about the world, but that's one thing about the market. He has earned it simply by creating this amazing product. So there is something to be said about that. I'm with you on it. Now,
Well, let's take it one step further, because many of your viewers are going to be Christians, and I would say to my Christian brothers and sisters, how many times a day do you pray for Bill Gates, Bob Iger, Tim Cook, Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey, people like that, that they would come to a position where they see what they're doing and they need to make the world a better place, not just reap rewards, right?
mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, most of our audience is Christian, I would say. So yeah, you're you're right. Um, Now, when I look at all the American entrepreneurs, and you outline many like Eli Whitney, and then obviously Carnegie. I'm from Pittsburgh, so that's
Yep,
near and dear to my heart. His background, but the one that stands out that I think has impacted the world more than any other entrepreneur is Rockefeller.
absolutely.
And the reason why is if you look at his rise, it is right there with the education system, the pharmaceutical world, and yes, the Federal Reserve. You talk about a corrupt system, he's at the helm of them all. So, what would you say about Rockefeller? What did you learn when you covered the aspects of his life?
Well, first of all, Rockefeller was a very pious man, a devout Baptist who gave him, when he was in his heyday, gave $1 million a year. This is back in the 1800s. So that was a lot of money. He gave $1 million a year to his church. His main concern, you read his memoirs, you look at Cherno's book, for example, Titan, which is the best biography of Rockefeller. And even he admits Rockefeller's overwhelming concern was in lowering the price of energy, kerosene, for the common man. That was at the forefront of everything he wanted to do. So whenever he engaged in cutting costs, and he had remarkable talents for finding ways to cut costs. For example, he had to ship in barrels. Well, why pay barrel makers when you can hire your own barrel makers and make your own barrels? Later, why ship in barrels when you could put it through a pipe and ship it through a pipeline? So let's own the pipeline. Did he do some shady things? Yeah. But his main goal in doing all this stuff was to lower the cost, lower the cost, lower the cost. And in the kind of as a sideline of all of that, an unintended consequence, what does he do? He saves the whales, because whales were the #1 energy industry in the world going into the 1850s. Whaling was a huge business in America because people use whale oil for interior illumination. And then all of a sudden, you can see charts and whaling just drops off the map after Rockefeller introduces cheap kerosene. So, but you're right, he does end up at the kind of center of education, pharmacies, and Duke Rockefeller, Foundation is at the middle of the development business, the dev biz, all this kind of stuff, right? Would he have done all that? I'm not so sure, but these kinds of things kind of spin out of your control after you're dead.
Yeah, right. So he died in 1937. The pharmaceutical world starts to take form, what, in the 20s and 30s? The
Yeah.
AMA, right? He creates the AMA, right? It's just unbelievable how much influence he has over what's happening in today's world. So let's go into 1912, 1913, the Federal Reserve, real quick. You
Yep.
probably have done a lot of research on this. A bunch of entrepreneurs got together and they say, how do we create a deaded nation, right? So can you just give a little outline on what you've read, what you've analyzed, what you found out whenever you saw the creature from Jekyll Island being born, if you will?
Well, of course, this is one of the things in my forthcoming book, Patriots History of Globalism. Um, it's really a bad rap on the Fed, and Jekyll Island really has very little to do with any of this. My background is in banking and financial history. My first 5 books, academic books, are banking and financial history. And if people want a great source on this, it's by a guy named Eugene White, called The Regulation and Reform of American Banking. So here's the situation. Going into the late 1800s, we had a structure where you had national banks, which were chartered by the federal government, and they had the authority to print dollars. Okay, each bank printed its own national bank note. You had state banks, which vastly outnumbered the national banks, and those could not print notes, but they had cheaper capitalization requirements. So there were more state banks than national banks. Problem was that there was no backstop. If you got a real panic brewing, there was no way to come in and stop the panic, nip it in the bud. And we had panics in 1819, 1837, 1857, 1873, 1893, and 1907. And the bankers were tired of it. They
And,
were sick and tired of always having to deal with this.
and real quick, just to kind of touch on that, the panics had to do with like gold and silver, right? Because basically, there was all kinds of fear about the gold. What is the real currency of the U.S., right? There was the battle between gold and silver. I think 1893 was the culmination of that. So that's what you're saying, right?
Right. Well, we were on a gold standard only in American history, but there wasn't that much gold. And so as a result, we would import a lot of silver in the form of Spanish dollars or English coins or other coins. So the ratio all through the 1800s was about 15 silver dollars of some sort to one gold dollar.
Oh,
Now, our banking system was authorized at the state level up until the Civil War to print its own notes. I don't know if you knew that anybody could print money prior to the Civil War.
I did
An
not know that.
insurance company, a shipping company, banks. The key was you had to redeem your notes in gold. So somebody walks into your bank, says, I'm going on a trip. I want to take $20 gold with me. Here's $20 of your notes. You had to be able to pay them out in gold. If you couldn't, the state legislature would shut you down. This operated until the Civil War, and it was fairly stable. We really only have one bad panic. The second panic in 57 was totally the result of the Dred Scott decision that caused the West to go totally in upheaval. By the way, that's my best cited article in all of my work is the Panic of 1857 article I did with Charlie Calamero showing that the Dred Scott decision started the Panic of 1857. But anyway, after the Civil War, only national banks can print money, right? So you get all of these panics because if a bank, for whatever internal reason, starts to collapse, there's no way other bankers can come in and save that bank and bolster it until you get it fixed. And so the big misunderstanding about the Fed is it was created on Jekyll Island. No, it was created over a 20 or 30-year period by the American Bankers Association, representing thousands and thousands of small banks desperate for a way to stop these panics by having a lender of last resort. And so that's really was the first and main mission of the Fed. Second mission was to provide money, expand the currency in good times, contract the currency in bad times. And then the last one was to reduce the power of New York banks. How ironic that the Fed, which was created to reduce the power of New York banks, probably increased the power of New York banks.
Wow. I didn't know that. That is news to me, man. That's interesting. Now, why do you think, and I think I know the answer to this, but for our listeners, why do you think the American entrepreneur gets sort of a bad rap? Is it simply because the education system wants people controlled? Therefore, if you adopt the entrepreneur mentality, I have this philosophy and I have it within my company, think like an entrepreneur. If you think like an entrepreneur, you can see opportunities. Wherever there's chaos, there's usually opportunity. And where there's chaos, I mean, people are running for the hills. That gives you such an advantage. So what would you say is the main reason why American entrepreneurship is looked down upon by the education system to this day?
Well, by nature, educators are not entrepreneurs, most of them. There's a few more free market educators like myself, but most of them, as we say, couldn't make it in the real world, so they end up in teaching, right? And the old thing, if you can't teach, if you can't
I've heard that many
teach
times.
teachers, right? So you become a university professor that teaches teachers. But another reason is that most of them are leftward. Today, most of them are far leftward. And as such, they have a built-in hostility to the free market and to entrepreneurs. And so this kind of myth of the robber barons rose, where all the robber barons like Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, Mellon, some of the others we talked about were all bad guys. And I'll recommend a great book to your viewers, which is called The Myth of the Robber Barons by my friend Bert Folsom. It's a little book, and he takes on 5 or 6 of these case studies and just annihilates them. It's a really best-selling book, Myth of the Robber Barons by Bert Folsom. So over time, the education system has done its job, and it's convinced people that big business is bad, A little business is okay, but of course, every little business wants to be a big business. So, very few people say, oh, I want to just stay at $300,000 a year. Yeah, that's where I'm happy. No, everybody wants to grow to 1 million. When you're 1 million, you want 10 million. That's just human nature.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point there. Education system. I think I saw a study that shows 16 for every 17 professors in high level college, 16 are liberal, one conservative. Now
Right.
that is crazy. That's a cult, right? There's no free thinking going on there. And it probably has to do with maybe the great philosophy on straight A students work for the B and C students. And that usually the professors were the great students that, I don't know, like you said, they lose out because the school system has this one structured path. All right, go to school, get in debt, get a job, and that leads to happiness. Well, the entrepreneur thinks, wait a second, that's not my life. Let me create and never stop creating. And it's
Right.
like a run. And I look at this as the entrepreneurial journey. Everybody's on this race, whether they realize it or not. Some people want to just keep running just for the fun of it, right? And then communism or socialism will come in and say, hey, because you love running the whole 26.2 miles, we don't like that. You got to stay with the pack. So we're going to bring it down. You stay with the pack at the 12-mile mark, right?
Right.
When the person really just wants to run. And I think that is going to lead to a state of depression, right? The people who are forced to be in a pack whenever they're born to be on their own or just keep running, you're limiting their strengths, their ability to produce for others. So maybe there's something to be said about people who are at high level schools do not like seeing others continue the journey of running whenever they don't want to run. So anything you could say about that you've noticed amongst your associates?
Well, I once heard capitalism. I think it was Walter Williams described capitalism as a 6'4" man trapped inside a 4-foot cage where he could never fully expand to his height. Um, I taught at a fairly conservative private Catholic Midwestern school my whole career. And in the history department, the number was something like 20 or 22 liberals or Democrats to just 2 Republicans. I've seen many, many surveys that show that at most schools, the number can be 100 to 1 or 50 to 1. And there was also a very interesting survey that came out the other day about Harvard that only 8% of Harvard's student body was Protestant. Now, you think about the old Protestant work ethic, you're going to have some issues if only 8% of your 7 or 8% of your student body believes in that work ethic. So the whole university structure is geared against entrepreneurship. And one of my favorite bugaboos is business schools that have entrepreneurship programs. I'm sorry, entrepreneurs are born like leaders. You can't make an entrepreneur, right? And so by sending them into these programs that I don't think they're getting a whole lot, and to show you the shift over time. When I left the University of Dayton 2016, I asked my class. Now, I taught a class called American Economic and Business History. Okay, so the vast majority, almost all the students in there were business majors, And so I asked, how many of you want to start a business when you get out of college? 5 hands went up out of
What?
about 30, right? That's scary. Business majors. So what did they want to do? They wanted to be managers. That's terrifying because we're living in an age called the administrative man. I had a column on this in my news, today's news, about 6 weeks ago, the administrative man. And it's basically the manager, the world of the managers. And so Alfred Chandler wrote this seminal book in 77 called The Visible Hand about the rise of managers. And he said that managers don't like risk. And so they will willingly take less profit, a 2 or 3% growth in profit every year, over 20% growth one year, 15% loss the next year, because they hate that that risk. They'd rather have safety. Well, so you end up with a whole cadre, which is where we are today, of business leaders that are risk averse. The only exception is Silicon Valley, where they'll back almost anything, as Elizabeth Holmes can attest to. and but other than that, the rest of America is risk averse, and this is why you end up with Bob Iger at Disney going along with all this woke crap, because his minions in the HR department and the advertising department have convinced him this is where the least risk is. These people will make your life hell, so make movies for them, and therefore you won't have to worry about risk.
What you just saw the other day, whenever Elon Musk said to Bob Iger to go F himself, was the difference between an administrative man and an entrepreneur. I
Exactly.
see entrepreneurship as, hey, you know what? I am free in every shape and form. And how dare you try to control me and put me in that cage when I'm a 6'4" man, right? So
Yep.
Bob Iger, though, was not an entrepreneur. He is
Yep.
possibly one of the greatest negotiators the planet has ever seen, right? I mean, he bought a lot of great companies, right? He bought, I believe, Lucasfilm and all these other great companies. Now, he was not the startup of Disney. So that's
No.
a different mentality. And you are right, where he was looking at it as saying, let me just avoid risk. When you see Elon Musk out there saying, I control my own destiny and I produce whatever I want because I know what the market wants, period. I'm not
Yeah.
thinking about what the downfalls are. I'm going to produce for these people because that's what I want. And I
Musk
loved
says,
it.
I embrace risk. He says, let's go to Mars. Let's find a way to go to Mars. He's a private entrepreneur, and he's saying, let's go to Mars, which previously was thought to be just the domain of governments, right? How dare an individual say, let's go to Mars? But let's go back to Disney, because Walt was an entrepreneur. And this guy, he breaks the mold every single time. First, he comes out with this audio sound cartoon of Steamboat Willie. Then he does the unthinkable, a feature film, which is fully animated, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And then he breaks the mold with a feature film that doesn't have a single story, but has like 5 different stories, all set to the greatest music of the last 100 years, Fantasia. Then he says, well, let's start our own television show. And then he says, well, let's start our own amusement park. And at each step of the way, Walt was way ahead of the curve. He would close down this company in a second, fire everybody, and start over.
Right. The private sector creates the wealth, not government. And anybody who's telling you otherwise is ill-informed or completely lazy, I think, for them to even do any type of research. You want wealth? Give the solution or give the problem to the entrepreneur for them to solve it for others. Get out of their way and incentivize them to keep running that marathon.
Right.
And I see the administration we have today. I mean, they want control and they look at people like Elon Musk as the enemy. Hey, these people are free in every way that I'm not. So we got to
Yeah.
hate him for that. Um, you bring up a couple other great people, like you said, with Walt Disney. I think he was a magnificent entrepreneur. I think his company has completely gone off the rails. I don't trust it one bit. But there are a few other ones that you talk about in this book that changed this world. And I don't know if you want to kind of go into some other people like the Steve Jobs or significant entrepreneurs that really shaped what we have. And maybe there's a quality that stands above everyone that you see, and it's common amongst the great ones. What is it, and who
Let
are
me
these
give you
people?
3 that probably many of your viewers have never heard of. First one is Frederick Tudor, the Ice King. He's a Massachusetts guy who starts out and he notices, gee, we have a big pond of ice in our backyard. And he says, down south, they have a lot of heat. I wonder if they'd like ice cooled drinks. So he cuts up ice and he goes on a sales tour where he literally will go into inns and hotels and restaurants and give them free ice to try out with their clientele. And they all end up placing orders with him. And then before too long, he invents an ice cutting machine so he can go cut this ice much faster than chop it by hand. And he's selling ice like crazy in the South, and it truly transforms the way we drink. I won't drink a Pepsi or a Coke without ice in it. I must have ice in my drinks, right? It's changed how we drink drinks.
What year
Now,
is this?
later,
I've never heard of this guy. What year is this?
This would be like the 1830s, 40s.
Wow.
It's in the first part of American Entrepreneur. And he doesn't quit there. He gets involved in a coffee trade speculation that fails. So this is a very important thing to understand, is that entrepreneurs don't hit a home run every time. Even some of the great ones screw up big time, and he had to just go back to selling ice. All right. Second one let's talk about is Sam Colt. Samuel Colt invented the Colt 45 firearms, but he has a very interesting story. He was into explosives and just generally causing chaos as a kid, and his parents shipped him off to India on a merchant ship to try and teach him a lesson and have him grow up. And while he's on the merchant ship, he whittles the basis of the 45 revolver out of wood. When he gets back home, he shows it to his parents. They go, okay, we'll back you for this, to get a gunsmith to make this. So he gets a gunsmith, and the first Colt pistols were extremely complicated, were very difficult pieces. Every single thing had to be handmade from scratch. And they tried selling it to the Army and had a small problem. It tended to blow up in your hand every fourth or fifth time. The Army goes, no, 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 we don't want that, right? But they had sold a bunch of them to Texas Rangers. So true story, a group of Texas Rangers are down there on the Texas frontier, and they get in a gunfight with an Indian force 5 times their number. But because they have, and the Indians were used to guys shooting one shot and then having to reload a musket, right? They charge, and all of a sudden these guys got 5 more shots each, and surprise, surprise. So the head of the Texas Rangers, a guy named, wait for it, Walker, Texas Ranger,
No.
sends a
No
letter,
way.
to Sam Colt, and he tells him about the episode. He goes, I could help you make this pistol into a better pistol at work. He does, and just in time, the war with Mexico breaks out, and now the War Department is ready for pistols at work. They put in a huge order, and Colt Firearms, which went broke one time, now is back and was a flourishing company.
Oh my
The
God.
third one,
Great story.
let's talk about real quick is Ruth Handler. Ruth Handler was a born saleswoman. She married a guy who was very handy with plastic stuff, and they made and sold plastic knickknacks, things for tabletops and stuff. Well, they got into making toys, and they made something which was a wind-up jack-in-the-box and a ukulele that you played by turning a handle, and the handle would make the noise, and a kid could pretend they were playing the ukulele. It was called a Yukadoodle. Well, they came up with a new, something that people freak out today. They came up with a new product, which was a burp gun, a machine gun made on like the Al Capone mode, right? And they decided they were going to sell it directly to kids. They weren't going to waste their time with the parents, who were the main toy buyers at the time. They were going to go directly after the kids. So where do they go? Walt Disney's Mouseketeers, right? The Mickey Mouse Club. And they run ads on Mickey Mouse Club, and it literally would show a little boy out there hunting in the jungle, and here comes an elephant. He's using a burp gun on an elephant, right? But it sold like crazy. And at one time, they only had 2 left in the entire factory floor, and both of them were broken. So Ruth Handler says, okay, good. Now I want a toy for girls. And she kept coming up with a doll, but she didn't want a baby doll. She wanted something that would appeal to young girls' hopes and dreams of being, having a career or being glamorous or whatever it was. So she goes to Europe, and she sees a little doll called Lily with long legs and big boobs swinging on a car in a taxi cab. And she goes, that's my doll. She comes back home, refashions the doll as Barbie, and goes to the New York Toy Fair. I think it's 1959 or 1960. They expect to get 1 million orders. Not one person would buy the doll because it was too sexy. So what does she do? Mickey Mouse Club. She goes back to the Mickey Mouse Club, best-selling toy in human history. I've seen that there's a Barbie doll sold every 2 seconds in the world.
My God. I just love
after the
these
movie,
stories.
it's probably even more, right?
There's just so many magical moments, and like you realize how these entrepreneurs, it wasn't like they hit the lottery. It was they kept trying, and then they met the right person, and then this led to another opportunity. So it's amazing how it all connects. And what I want to get to before we wrap up for today is I think you have in the book the entrepreneurial explosion of 1820 to 1847, somewhere in there. And I believe that the base of America is entrepreneurship. And the moment you get away from that, because most people employed for a couple hundred years were in a small business, but the more it becomes corporate and individuals are reliant on a few conglomerates to pay them, now it gets lopsided and they can control you. They force you what you put in your body, they could force you how much you make, and you
Yep.
start to lose your sovereign rights, I guess you could say. So I think that there should be a mandatory requirement for people to start a business just to get a sense of it, that the more you develop as a personal person, the more you start to realize, like you said, your self-awareness, your strengths, your weaknesses, your allies, your enemies. It's the hero's journey. So what do you say? Can you bring us back to the entrepreneur explosion and then what you're seeing today where they're not teaching entrepreneurship? People are
Right.
going to work for companies and corporations, and that is leading to a serious problem in the future.
Well, let's do three quick things as we wrap up. Number one, the explosion that it starts in around 1850 or 60, after this first wave of big entrepreneurs comes through, like McCormick and Colt and these other guys, scholars now have re-looked at that. And there's a guy named Gordon who has a brand new book that recalculated the growth rates. It's called the Rise and Decline of American Growth, I think, something like that. And he found that, in fact, scholars have underestimated the amount of growth that took place from about 1860 to about 1930, that this was by far the most productive period in all of human history in terms of economic growth. Second thing, I don't like mandating people to do anything,
Right.
but as an instructor, I of course had to have requirements. And so one of my requirements in my business history course was find someone in your family, can be extended family or even a friend, who has started a business, and write a term paper about their business. And I got to tell you, my students like that probably more than any other project they did in college. So they would say that they got to go into their family businesses and find out what really permitted them to go to college and how hard their parents were. And we got some of the weirdest businesses. I mean, one kid's family created a horse treadmill. Another one created a gift basket business that did all these porcelain gift baskets that just became huge. Another one, if you look on pallets when products come in and they're sealed in plastic, in the very corner of the pallet, there's this weird looking little cardboard thing that kind of holds everything in place. And this guy invented all that. So my students really came up with all of this sort of stuff. And so getting back to the problem with today, there have been studies done on innovation and research and so forth. And one of the things that's occurred with the new diversity, equity, inclusion garbage is it has
DEI.
dramatically,
Guys, look
yep,
this up. This is scary shit. It all ties back to the Open Society Foundation, all that. So yeah.
it has really cut down on the amount of innovation in our society. The number of patents have fallen fairly dramatically. The number of new research papers has fallen dramatically. And then one study of research papers not too long ago, by the way, this is all in my book, A Patriot's History of Globalism, is coming out in February. One study of research papers found that they are not going nearly as deeply as they used to in terms of real breakthrough stuff. In other words, they're chumming along the surface. Why? Because it's safe. Because DEI isn't going to come get you if you don't say anything outrageous. If you're not creating a business that's making some people mad, if you're not saying something that's making some people upset, you're not doing nothing.
Great point. And people are becoming more afraid to put their true beliefs out there simply
Right.
because of groupthink mentality, but also for fear of, like you said, these organizations either removing their funding or penalizing them for pursuing greatness. And it makes me think of, you ready for this story on the individual mandate? You talk about how mandates are a bad thing. I was so broke in 2013. My accountant came to me and said, "You can't afford health insurance, so you're going to get penalized for not having health insurance." It's called the individual mandate.
Right.
And he said the way to get free healthcare is to give up your business. If you don't have a business in your name and you give up on it, you're going to be rewarded with welfare and all these government programs. And it clicked. They don't want you going after freedom,
Right.
possibility, and opportunity. So that's why I fight it, and I believe capitalism is the only way. So yeah, it's coming down the pike more and more that these organizations want to get involved in every aspect. Am I right?
Oh yeah, they will eventually determine or try to determine what you eat. Right? They're already trying to do that. So to heck with them. And I think, and again, this goes back to Patriots History of Globalism. The subtitle is its rise and decline. And I think we're finally starting to see the corner being turned in so many ways of people. I mean, just look at the latest vax rollout, and only like 1% of the people said they were going to take the latest booster. People said, nope, had enough, been there, done that. And this is why I don't think that that vax thing is going to work against President Trump. I think people say, all right, we give him credit for trying. He didn't make it a national mandate. We've been there, done that. We're not going to go back and relive the vax wars. Let's go. Next thing.
Yep. I don't think they're gonna have a new playbook to try to pull one over on the audience again. I don't know
Right.
what they're going to do, but I have a prediction what they're going to pull out in 2024. I believe that Kamala is going to step away, and that means Biden's going to step away. Therefore, it clears the path. Gavin Newsom is put in place against Trump. And then Gavin has this new smile, new face. He's energetic. Oh, he's the one that's going to be the savior. That's what I predict. What are your thoughts for 2024?
Well, and that's a reasonable prediction, but there's a few problems with it. Number one, Newsom is polling worse than Rutabaga, as I call Joe Biden. Uh,
Really? Is he? I
Newsom is
didn't know that.
both Harris and Newsom poll worse than Rutabaga against Trump. Number two, this your window for doing that is narrowing, but you do above all other people I've talked to really get the sequence. Sequence must be you've got to remove Harris, or Kampuchea Harris, as I call her, from her communist Cambodia days. You got to remove her first. Then
Yep.
you can get Biden to step down. Otherwise, you're going to end up with Harris as the nominee, and she'll get slaughtered. So, but you have a clock problem, and that's starting to become a real issue. We're almost into the 2-minute warning here.
Mm.
And that is that pretty soon, starting in the very early fall, they've got to print ballots for absentee and early ballots, which have to be mailed out. So they've got to print them a month before they're mailed out, which means they've got to be reviewed and checked by the parties, by all the candidates, by the campaigns, then say, yes, these are the correct names, spelled right, all that sort of stuff. So you've really got till about August to make a switch. Moreover, sometime in around early summer, they're going to start spending huge amounts of money on ad buys. And so if they make a switch anytime after that, all that money is wasted. You got to
Ooh.
start all over again. So there's a lot of problems with trying to switch out Rutabaga. And I think they're just about at the end of their rope with him. And I think it's going to be a blowout. But we're a year out. Anything can happen. Last time the China virus happened about 2 months from now, right?
That's exactly right. So I was wondering what they were going to do because the economy was unbelievable in 2019. You remember the biggest issue was plastic straws? I swear to God, that was the biggest issue on American TV. So
I used to joke that when we first turned out Patriots History of the United States, we didn't think we were going to get a publisher, and we thought we'd have to sell that out of the back of a van with like plastic straws, buddy, plastic straws, Patriots History.
yeah, it was pretty nuts there for a while. And now who knows what they have in store for 2024. I just think it's going to be an unbelievable year. It's going to be so exciting. And when you see CNN and all these other government propaganda machines saying that Trump is destroying Biden in the polls, you
Mhm.
know they are pulling something out to get him out of there, I think. So it's going to be an amazing year. But my last piece here that I want to bring up is American entrepreneurship is the way. I believe that in order to take care of your life, you need to be totally in control. And that means get your money right. And the way to do that, and the only way truly, is to become an entrepreneur. So what would you say to our audience that is, maybe they're leaning on the whole fence of maybe escaping that corporate world or starting their business? What would you say?
Well, I mean, not every person's cut out to be an entrepreneur more than every person's cut out to be a soldier or, pilot. But for those who are leaning that way, you've got to carefully weigh what's my money situation? Can I afford to follow my dream? And if in any way you can afford to follow your dream, you will regret it forever if you don't do that. Right. So I think that you always need to keep that in consideration. Is this something I can do? Let me try it.
Mm. It's been interesting to talk with you, sir. Your books have many reviews. Now, if you guys look him up, Larry Schweikert, he has many books with hundreds of reviews, and it looks like you have a foreword by Steve Bannon. So you know some
Hmm.
of these guys, I guess, huh?
Yeah, Steve did the foreword for Patriots History of Globalism, again, which will be out February 20th. I got two websites, the Wild World of Politics.com, where I talk politics, and we have today's news is on that site every day of the week. And then we have the Wild World of History. If you're an educator, homeschooler, we have full curricula in US and world history for high schoolers, again, with a very entrepreneurial bent, a very Christian flavor. So there's something for everybody out there. Wildworldofpolitics.com, wildworldofhistory.com.
There's a guy that I want to connect you with. I just did a podcast with. He has a book that's called Common Sense of Economics, and he's trying to find somebody who has the reach that you do, and he's a very well-respected author. So I'll have to put you guys in touch. But
Do it,
it has been
because
an
we are looking for a high school homeschool book on economics and on civics, because currently there's nothing out there that I like that I can take to my parents.
I'll make the connection right after this call.
Okay, Mike.
Larry Schweikert, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for being here. Guys, look him up, go to his website. And Larry, let's do this again very soon, because 2024 is going to be exciting. I'd love to have you back sometime next year, okay?
Well, why don't we do it again sometime March or April after Patriots History of Globalism comes out, and we can talk about that book.
You got it. Absolutely.
All right.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.